Hello. Today we're talking about Sky Destroyer for the Famicom. Sky Destroyer released in November 1985, November 15th. It was developed by Home Data, which would later become Magical Company, and it was published by Taito. It seems that Magical Company is no longer making games, but when they were, their most popular franchise was the Koshien franchise, which was a Japanese high school baseball game. Taito, however, is still making games. So there's not much else on the development history that I was able to find for Sky Destroyer. I wasn't able to find who programmed the game, who designed the game, anything of that nature. And I wasn't able to find if the team was different for the arcade version or the Famicom version. That being said though, it's a rail shooter for the Famicom. And Sky Destroyer is the first non-Nintendo published game that I'll be reviewing on the channel. So if you've never heard of Sky Destroyer, it's because it was Japan only. And if you're wondering why it was Japan only, it's because you are playing as a Japanese pilot combating the Western pilots. So you're shooting the West down, essentially. So that's why it was not released in the West, because the enemy is the West. I love you. The 3D in this game, because this game is like a false 3D sort of perspective, it's actually quite impressive. It's not perfect, and what they used to achieve that effect was pretty simple, but it is impressive. You have the sprite scaling, you have the water on the lower plane, and like as the planes are swooping in from the left or right side of the screen or from the middle, they get bigger. And the shooting too is also like a simulated 3D in that the bullets even have sprite scaling. They grow bigger, and as you're shooting them, they get smaller when they get further away. This game does have some slowdown when there's a lot on screen, but that won't happen until around after scene 4, if you even make it that far. The game is extremely difficult. It doesn't happen too often. Even though there is minimal slowdown though, when it does happen, it can really cost you. I'm not that good at arcade shooters, so this game seemed very difficult to me, but it might not be so difficult for seasoned shoot 'em up players. Another thing is, as I was playing this game and to review it, I lost track of time, and as I was recording gameplay, I realized I had recorded almost 2.5 hours of footage, and I swear it felt like an hour and a half tops. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, I just felt I should mention it. My thumb was also sore after playing multiple times. It has that kind of like that Mario Kart effect, where if you're playing Mario Kart with someone who doesn't play games very often, they tend to press really hard on the A button to go. I was having this effect but applied to the D-pad, because it feels like your plane isn't moving quite fast enough. The bullets are flying in all directions, and sometimes you just can't dodge them. And for the music, there's hardly any. There's kind of an Indiana Jones ripoff for the title theme. And then music will also play as you make it through each of the scenes. And the scenes are just the levels. So speaking of game structure, scenes are levels. I'm not sure if there's a limit to how many scenes are in this game. The furthest that you will see in my footage is scene 7, but naturally playing it, I was not able to get further than scene 4. I feel I should also mention that all of the gameplay for this was recorded on original hardware. I'm recording directly out from Japanese AV Famicom with the high-def NES mod. So you have these scenes, and each scene concludes with an island rising from the horizon with a coastal mobile battery unit, which is a gigantic moving gun. And once you blow that up with one of your torpedoes, that's what allows you to progress to the next scene. Beating the battery will allow you to access a bonus stage, but only if you survive as you're destroying it, because several times in my playthroughs, I had dropped a torpedo, blown up the island, but I got hit on the way as I was doing it, crashed down, burned, didn't get the bonus stage, but also was able to progress as if I had beaten the level normally. You've got 8 types of enemies, I suppose. You have blue planes, which shoot at you, red planes, which glide down. There are slower subs that move and go in and out of the water, and then there are faster subs that have kind of a U-shaped trajectory. Aircraft carriers that will pop up on the horizon, and for me, those were the most satisfying to blow up. You just kind of have to get like a little on the left side of them when you're dropping your torpedo. Then up in the sky, you've got the B-52 bombers, and you have to blow up all 4 of those engines to get them, and they can be really difficult to hit all of them sometimes. And sometimes after you beat the B-52s, you've got a satellite that will come down from the sky, and that is worth the big bucks. That's where, like, I think it's 15,000 points for being able to blow up one of those. I missed them several times, and that is one of the most painful things in the game. But hitting them is really satisfying, and it's a really nice treat when you see it happen. And then there's the coastal battery, which is like moving side to side on the shore of the island. That's pretty much all the enemies, and supposedly the planes that you are fighting against are F6F Hellcats. So some strategy, or I guess tips that I can offer you from my time playing this game: don't get hit. Simple as that. Just kidding. You have 1 hit per life. So if you get hit, you go to your next life. I actually don't even remember how many lives you start with, and I'm not sure that if you get the bonus, your life is restored or not, because I was never able to successfully complete a bonus level. Also, aiming, when you're aiming, it's not going to go exactly where you think it's going to go. Your bullets will shoot in kind of a triangle, and you kind of want to line up the enemy plane with like right where that triangle would be, like right where they're merging. But sometimes you can hit them closer with the further away bullets when the planes are getting closer to you on the screen. Another tip would be know that it's okay to dip out. Many times I'm like trying to take on a B-52 or I'm trying to take on some subs and there's just too much fire, and so I'll either go up or I'll go down. Sometimes there are both submarines shooting at you and a B-52 bomber ahead or above, sorry. And it's really difficult to manage that, but it's not all the time. If you're finding you're having too much trouble down by the sea or too much trouble up in the air, you can always switch your position. And then one thing that I wish that I had going into this game, playing it again, and something that I will bring me back to this game in the future, is the NES advantage is huge for this game. Mashing the A button as fast as you can while trying to steer slowly with the D-pad. Like if that was a joystick and like an A button that you could program to automatically fire as fast as possible, like while also hitting the B button to keep dropping torpedoes, that would be fantastic. And always drop torpedoes. Like you can drop those guys like when you're up in the air, and several times like it will go down as I'm going down and hit something and you get points for it. And I guess this is a game where you want to get a high score, but again, it feels more like a survival game. It feels like more like just see how far you can get it, see how many different islands you can see. Because the islands are cool. As they're coming up on the horizon, that's one of the biggest rewards in the game, is just being able to see what different design is coming up. I don't have the manual for this game, but the box art is classic. Another thing I wish that I had realized when I was purchasing this game is that someone had actually drawn on a mustache on the pilot. The cartridge itself is a little less friendly than the Nintendo published games I've reviewed so far. The Taito logo on the front looks interesting, but on the back it has the wording Taito Corporation, which just makes it feel kind of sterile. I'd prefer that there was just no text on the cartridge other than the labeling. So like final thoughts on Sky Destroyer. It's good, but it's not great. It's not on the same level of greatness as, say, other early titles like Excite Bike, Balloon Fight, or Super Mario Bros. It does have a really nice depth of field to it, and it does feel pretty immersive when you get in there. As I said, I lost a lot of time. I lost track of time, I should say, playing this game. But it doesn't feel like something you need to play. If you never played it or never even heard of it, you're not really missing out on too much. That being said, if you have the ability to try it, I'd say definitely try it. It's a lot of fun. It's low commitment. You can just hop in and dip out. I feel like it's not so much like those other games in the early NES library where it's not as big of a commitment to play Sky Destroyer. You don't have to go in thinking you're going to definitely beat it, because it's extremely hard and you're probably not going to make it that far. It's also a game where if you just want to see what's out there, I think that it's okay to use save states. The controls are decent and the gameplay is fun enough. It can get pretty frustrating just like trying to blow up some of the bombers. I know there were several times where it's just like you're mashing and mashing and mashing and you just can't quite get there. Oh, one more thing about the advice. So for advice, you need to figure out, you also need to figure out if you're better in the air or better near the ocean. I saw a lot of advice saying that the submarines were easier to deal with and the aircraft carriers than the B-52s, but I actually found that I had more success with the B-52s in the long run once I figured out that it was easiest to kind of stick to one side of the B-52 and blow up 2 engines on one side and then kind of dip down or dip above and then blow up the 2 engines on the other other side. The other thing about the B-52s is that once you notice, the thing that's going to get you the most is they'll fire off these slow shots that will explode. And once you notice those, it becomes easier to avoid them and then easier to take them down. I personally had a lot more trouble getting the torpedo delay memorized enough to where I could reliably hit the submarines. So overall, try it if you have access to try it. And thanks for watching.
Yo.